All right. I believe we're live. We should be live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. And I just want to do a quick intro. Obviously, I'm John from Tesla Owners of Silicon Valley. Really excited to have one of the experts, really just in the whole Tesla space, really, and also to autonomy, and really one of the early beta testers, Omar from Holds Mars blog. Can't speak today. Whole Mars blog, but just a FUD fighter. I've known him personally since the shareholder meeting in 2019. We were literally sitting. I think he was in the third row. I was in the fourth row with Raj and I believe Vincent. And so I personally have known him for, almost 4 years now. But he's just become a personal friend. He's also been a member of the club for a long time, obviously between splitting his time between San Francisco and Los Angeles. But he's really just become a face of the community, not only because of a lot of the stuff that he's had to go through with crazy lawsuits with people just putting out fake news, and even lawsuits, him being involved in lawsuits with Elon Musk against Aaron Greenspan. And so he's just, again, a wealth of knowledge. And so, I'm thankful that I can personally just call him a friend, but also too, just to be able to kind of tap his brain, especially on things like autonomy. So let's bring him in. Omar, what's up, man?
Yeah, thanks, John. Great to be here.
Well, awesome. Yeah, I just, there's so much obviously happening this year with Tesla. It just seems like every week there's just something new. But specifically, you're one of the original 35 beta testers since October of 2020. And I just wanted to, obviously, you're posting videos. I think I can just bring one up right now. I mean, you're literally, it feels like you live in your car, just driving literally all over the Bay Area, even in Los Angeles. I mean, you've done some amazing drone shots. And so I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about, kind of, what you've seen since you became a first beta tester, kind of like what your assumptions were, and has this been, it's been literally 2.5 years or 2 years and 4 months. Like, has the improvements been what you were expecting? Has it been a little bit slower? What exactly have you kind of experienced over these past couple of years? So, but yeah, again, this is just another video of his just going 81 miles. Literally, it's FSD beta is handling the whole drive, literally zero disengagements. And so he's putting out videos like this 3 or 4 times a week. So, but yeah, I'll kick it over to you on kind of like what you've seen over the past couple of years.
Yeah, so I mean, we've come such a long way. It's been a pretty amazing journey. I remember that night when you and Raj first put out that video of FSD beta, and people just couldn't believe it, seeing autopilot make turns for the first time and handle city streets driving. And yeah, I remember uh, actually when we had done the third row interview with Elon. I had asked him, "Hey, when's FSD coming?" And I'm so excited to get it. And he said, "Well, it was still about a year away at that point, actually. I believe. Actually, I think it ended up coming out in October of that year, and the interview was in January. And he said, "Okay, when it's ready, we'll let you run the developer build basically before it's out," which then became FSD Beta, as we now know it, the FSD Beta early access program. And so then you actually got in a few days before me. And so then I was like, okay, then I probably started tweeting like, oh my God, I need this. And so then at some point, we just got the phone call from Tesla and they said, listen, I'm from the autopilot team and we're going to send you this beta self-driving software that is much more powerful. But look, you need to be careful because a lot of the boundaries we have on the old software, just this one can do really crazy things. Okay, so you got to be careful. So I was like, all right, I don't really care if it tries to kill me. I'm just so excited to try this, to experience it for the first time. And so then later that night, the download came and I downloaded it on my car. I installed it. I was in Los Angeles at the time. and I was with my friend, and I said, "Let's go try the self-driving software."
No
And we
big
went
deal.
out and we went out in the street and we tried it and we turned it on and it immediately dove to the right towards like a row of parked cars. And I grabbed the wheel and disengaged it. My friend's like screaming. She's like, ah, and that was the first time I turned on FSD beta. Then I said, okay, let me set an address. And I turned it on and I saw my car make a right turn for the first time. And I was just blown away. It was probably the shittiest right turn ever. Jerky, the steering wheel was like shaking, flying left and right. But it was the first time I'd seen my car make a right turn. And then I saw it make a left turn. And I said, wow, okay. This is stuff that we were told just is not possible with the current hardware suite. So that was an amazing thing to see. Wow, it actually is possible. But it was really shitty. You know, you couldn't
Yep.
get a zero takeover drive.
Yep.
It was very, very difficult. I was saying, okay, let me make a video. And all my videos were tons of takeovers because that's sort of where it was at. And it was very, very rare to have a zero takeover drive. You'd be like, wow, it would have to be very short distance. And it would probably, make a ton of mistakes. And over time, it's sort of gotten better and better to the point where it's certainly far from perfect. You still have takeovers often, but just in the video you showed, for example, I just had to run to Palo Alto from San Francisco to take care of something. And I said, I wonder if I can go all day without driving because my car was parked right outside on the street. So I got in the car, I punched in the address, turned on FSD beta. It took me all the way to Palo Alto and then, drove through Stanford's campus and then got back on the freeway and got back to San Francisco. The whole time out of 81 miles, it drove 80.95 miles. 260 feet to go park was all I did in the day. So you're now seeing the software basically get to a point where it can handle a real day of driving and do all of the driving for you. Not in every case, right? There's still lots of challenging things or issues it can encounter, but you're starting to see the dream of this software be realized, which I don't think anyone really imagined was possible. So it's really amazing to see the software improve and to see 400,000 people across the country get beta. Right? Um, we were probably among the first 200 people outside Tesla to try it more than 2 years ago, and now to see it available to anybody, a lot of people said they'll never be able to release it. It's
Yeah.
just never going to be good enough. And they've been able to do that. And for the most part, there haven't been any major disasters. It's been done safely and it's pushed the industry forward massively. It's just so exciting to see. And now coming into 2023 with hardware 4 right in the pipeline, it's going to be launched this year. Dojo starting to come online, being used for the auto labeling, and version 11 coming up with the single stack from the parking lot to the highway to the city streets, and all the software improvements that are going to come in the next 12 months. I think this is going to be, sort of the definitive 12 months for the project. This is the year where people will either be made into believers or see that this is going to take a really long time, right? It
Yeah.
all sort of depends on the next 12 months, I think. So this is a really exciting time.
Yeah, no, I think especially for myself, back when we were, that first week, I think the group became about 35 people. But yeah, that first week, I mean, when you turn it on, I think it was Raj and I, we were going to Target and you had no idea what this thing was going to do. And up until that point, all I had really seen was, you had seen navigate on autopilot really on the highways, and then
Mhm.
they had released some small updates with it being able to do stop signs and, stop lights and things like that.
Right.
But it had never done like left or right turns. So, but yeah, no, I think it's come a long way. I mean, like I said, you're literally driving through San Francisco on a regular basis, which is
Mhm.
probably one of the most difficult areas to go. You've probably been down Lombard Street. I went down with a Model X down Lombard Street the other day. But how would you say, because again, you've been all up and down California, you've even done road trips on it. How would you say like FSD beta is in San Francisco versus other locations? And like, what are the things that, let's say, need like the biggest jumps that need to be made to like potentially even get to where it's not necessarily like stalling like Waymo and cruises are, but just, getting to a point where, you really wouldn't have to do anything.
Yeah, so this is the really challenging part of the self-driving problem because if you had, let's say, a closed loop, you can get a car to be autonomous in a closed loop very easily, right? Like if you understand it, if you can map it well, like what Waymo's done in Chandler, Arizona, or what Cruise has done in their geofence in San Francisco, it's really easy to get reliability within a small area. That's actually been solved today. And that's why you can now go take a Waymo. You can go to Chandler, Arizona, download the Waymo app, and you can get a driverless car today. And if you're in Cruise's beta program in San Francisco, you can do that with a Cruise as well. So we figured that out. The hard part of the challenge that remains to be solved is how do you make it so this works anywhere, anytime, any place? And a lot of people say, oh, well, FSD beta only works in California, but that's really the beauty of it. Waymo's stuck in one neighborhood. They can't even get into downtown Phoenix just yet. Cruise is stuck in a few neighborhoods. FSD beta can truly work everywhere. We drove it from Los Angeles to Miami when I sold my car to Warren, and it worked across the country. Now, of course, there's some places where it works better than others, especially where there's a concentration of Tesla drivers. But I've used it in Los Angeles, I've used it in San Francisco, and in between taking road trips around. I'd say it's probably actually better in some ways in like the LA suburbs than San Francisco, just because San Francisco is so challenging.
Yep.
But San Francisco just is like, a crazy maze. You got streets going up, streets going down, people driving backwards, people running into the street. So it's really like this obstacle course, and that's why it's become America's self-driving playground. But I think trying it here, you really realize that the software is capable of handling incredibly complex things. Like there's so many challenges happening per mile in San Francisco that it's just sort of allowed me to see FSD beta in, I think, sort of an accelerated way here in the city, um, how it's improving, how it's dealing with these different challenges. And it's gotten to the point today where it's almost like, you can just turn it on, tell it to drive you home, and pretty reliably expect you to do it. Uh, even and so if they can do that in a dense urban environment like California, I believe that that is a proof that you can get the vision system to work anywhere, a rural road, a suburb, whatever. Now, you might say, okay, well, it actually doesn't work in my rural area today, but that's really because it hasn't been trained to handle those types of roads. It needs to just expand the training set so that some of the tasks can sort of be as accurate in those areas. But from a theoretical perspective, there's nothing stopping a vision system from being able to function in that environment if you've already proven that it can work in a dense urban environment.
Yeah, no, I would totally agree. I mean, again, I've had some driving, but again, nowhere close to you as far as San Francisco. I've done downtown San Jose, downtown Los Gatos, and I went to San Francisco on Sunday. I was up there, and even how it was handling these super inclined hills, like it's almost like it was still able to hold it, especially as it's waiting for people to cross the street. And as I was going up the road to Lombard Street and then eventually go down it, I mean, these are some of the most inclined hills that I think I've ever been on. And even like my regular automatic cars, like if I was driving my Honda Pilot, my wife's Honda Pilot, I would still have to almost hold the brake down and then gas it and then go. But it's
Yeah,
literally able to put it in hold that whole time and then
yeah.
eventually go. So, and I think the at least in San Francisco, the only major issue I saw was still kind of deciphering between some lanes versus others. And like it wanted to go right versus left, so that was a disengagement. But overall, it's pretty crazy because, like you said, San Francisco you have people that are obviously just not always in the right minds, just walking out in the middle of the street. You have
Yep.
street lanes and trolley lines, so it's like you're
Hmm.
literally having to distinguish between you know um, 4 or 5 different, if not tens of 20s of different types of like lines, and still being able to go straight. But yeah, I would say like, what would you say is potentially this upcoming year? You said the next 12 months is probably going to be, some of the most defining times, especially with a lot of the stuff you had mentioned. What do you think is going to be the greatest challenge? And what do you think is going to be the greatest strength? Like, what do you think is like, if they can just get this right, boom, they'll be good? Or, what are the things that you think that are going to be a lot more difficult to really fix?
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, San Francisco is like a MC Escher painting. It really is just ridiculous, some of the road layouts, and it's amazing how FSD Beta can handle it with just vision, and the camera placement and everything works just great. I think they really did a great job, and people definitely sort of underestimate what the current hardware is capable of. But yeah, over the next 12 months, I think this is the first 12 months of FSD Beta being released. So I believe that really within the next 12 months, the software will work pretty well for most people. That means all across the country, you'll be able to do zero takeover drives most of the time. You'll probably still have some takeovers occasionally for tough scenarios, but most of the simple stuff, the software will be able to handle across the country. That's sort of what I expect. And because that's sort of what I'm seeing currently, right? So I think over the next 12 months, with all the stuff they have in the pipeline, maybe they could get that more broadly working across a larger variety of conditions. Um, so, moving to single stack, having smart summon come onto FSD beta, the highways, that's a massive challenge that we've seen really keep keep the team up all year, right? I mean, obviously there have been a ton of FSD beta updates in the last year, but you first heard Elon talk about single stack in January 2022. So they've really been putting a lot of miles, a lot of testing on getting that to work really well because honestly, highways are high speed, they're dangerous. The standard has to be really, really high. Same with parking lots where you're driverless. So they're really working hard on that. That's going to be an insane milestone once it's released. And I'd have to say the biggest challenge is just going to be um, managing the fact that there's hundreds of thousands, soon millions of people using this, right?
Yep.
So they're going to be under a lot of scrutiny, right, from the government, from the public, from the media, and they really, really have to be careful in how they do things. There's obviously going to be people who abuse the system or do certain things. There's going to be certain accidents that people try and blame on FSD, like you saw with the Bay
Yep.
Bridge incident, where FSD beta wasn't even enabled, but they still, of course, blame FSD beta and say, "Oh, this is a sign. This happened the day after FSD beta was released." As if it hasn't been out since 2014. So, I think there's going to be a ton of scrutiny, a ton of people trying to put blame on them and say this is unsafe. But I think the data is overwhelmingly going to show that this reduces crashes. It makes people more safe. It makes people actually more aware because of the driver monitoring, and the computer adds an extra level of awareness that augments the safety of the system. But that's going to be a huge challenge to navigate because the fact is there have never been hundreds of thousands of people using a self-driving software. This is the first time
Yep.
that's ever happened, right? So we're charting a new path here. This is history, and there's there's certainly going to be a ton of disasters and drama along the way. So I don't think it's going
Yeah.
to be for the faint of heart. But at the end of the day, I think people will realize that this is the most important new safety technology in a long time, and um, it's really going to be bigger than any of us imagine. I think Amara's law really applies here, which says that people tend to overestimate the impact of technology adoption in the short run, but they tend to really underestimate it in the long run. And although, some people may have gotten a little excited, I mean, everybody sort of said, okay, everybody was sort of a little more optimistic on self-driving than really they thought. Ford said we're going to launch an autonomous vehicle service. Elon, of course, said we'll be ready in 2020. It's now 2023 now. So it's hard, right?
Yeah.
But you know what? Like they're doing the work and real stuff's happening. Real products are launching. This is now out there with hundreds of thousands of people. That's a big step. So I think the industry is continuing to march forward, and long term, the impact is probably much bigger than even Elon can imagine.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably one of the he probably, I'm gonna butcher this quote or something, but he had mentioned this could be one of the biggest, like, you being able to turn on full self-driving on your car is going to be one of the biggest updates ever in history, as far as like what something can do, like not do, versus eventually be able to do with literally just a software update. I mean, it's pretty incredible, I think. And the other thing too to call out is there's going to be so many people that are going to be driving on a daily basis and not realize that FSD beta, or pure Tesla Pure Vision saved them, or put them first. And so I think it's just one of those things where I don't think we ever, because you will only obviously ever hear if Tesla even like hit some random thing. It doesn't matter what it is. It's a Tesla in the news. But obviously you'll hear about all the things that Tesla does wrong, but you won't hear about the 100 times versus the one time that it saved a person. Maybe a person's
Yeah.
like walking through Costco, or a person was backing out and it dodged. But yeah, there's just so many times that there's those unsung stories that you just won't hear about. And I think that's
Yeah.
ultimately why. Were you gonna say? Go for it.
No, I mean, I think you're 100% right. And Tesla has videos of this. Like if you look at some of the autopilot team's talks and Andre Karpathy's talks, autopilot and FSD beta are preventing hundreds of people from getting hit by cars every day. And they're doing this via the active safety features in the autopilot that exists. And a lot of times you can actually get clips of this events after they happen and send them back to Tesla for them to sort of diagnose the system and understand what happened. So they know about this, right? It's not abstract. They actually have videos. I've tweeted some of them where you can see, for example, someone walk into traffic and the car stops automatically because of the active safety system. I mean, this is just
Yep.
basic automatic emergency braking. Many
Yeah.
cars have it, but Tesla has the best, right? Or even forward collision warning, obstacle aware acceleration. There were people who were about to accelerate into a crowd of people, but the Tesla said, hey, that's a crowd of people. Even though you press the accelerator pedal, I'm not going to accelerate. Or somebody who was going to accelerate into a lake, and it said, I'm not going to allow you to accelerate into that lake. Or, you're changing lanes and someone's about to hit you. It'll put you back in your lane if you enable that feature. So these are pretty powerful things. And of course, every time you use autopilot or FSD beta, you have to buckle your seatbelt. It won't turn on if your seatbelt's not on.
Yep.
You can't use your phone. It's got a very strict driver monitoring system that's going to make sure your eyes are on the road, not on the screen, not on your phone. And if you look at other people on their car, they're all on their phone. So the
Yep.
only people on the road who are not using their phone are the people who are using FSD beta. So just that alone, just
Yep.
making the person actually look at the road. And furthermore, the people actually want to look at the road because they don't trust the system fully yet, right? Which is the right thing to do. So
Yep.
they want to double check and make sure they don't crash, but they're also making sure their phone is not in use. And so you have, I think, some of the most attentive drivers. And the software is making much more conservative choices. You give a normal person a Tesla that goes 0 to 60 in 3 seconds or 2 seconds, and they're not going to drive it, uh, probably what you'd call safe, right? But
Yep.
FSD beta will. It's going to stop to 0. NHTSA approved all the way to 0, and then continue. It's
Yep.
going to drive very conservatively. It's going to check before making that turn. It's going to make sure it's clear. It's going to be very respectful of pedestrians. It's going to give extra room to cyclists automatically, even if you didn't see them. So I think, people are always like, oh, the government's going to ban this, but they haven't. And I think the reason for that is they see, even though there's some risks, even though there's some stuff you really want to look at, make sure it's safe, overwhelmingly, this is going to be really positive, and it's actually preventing hundreds of people from getting hit every day. So a lot of the sort of naysayers will say, "Oh, Elon released this before it was ready, and it's not good enough yet, but he just released it anyway because he wants to make money or something like that." And you can see that sort of the opposite is true. If you waited to release it because you wanted it to get better, people would get hit by cars more often, right? And you can see that in the safety data they've published.
Yeah, I think I love how you just when you were talking, I love how you just brought up the fact that, FSD beta testers are going to be the safest drivers on the road because literally you will get kicked out for 2 weeks minimum now, if you end up actually like looking somewhere else. And so it's very strict. So I would actually say when I'm driving on FSD beta, I'm even more alert than when I'm normally driving just myself because again, you have to look out for everything. It could do something, that you're just not expecting, and you have to just be more alert. I'm in that old legacy group where we don't have the internal camera, but most of the people that have it today, the threes and the Ys and the refresh S and X, they all have that internal camera. But again, you know, you will have to be more alert. There's nothing you can do if you don't, you get kicked out. Whereas before you were out potentially 3 or 4 months. Like I got kicked out, I think right before we did the Elon interview in May. I literally had to ask him, "Hey, can you let me back in?" But outside of that, it's like you would get kicked out, and you didn't know when you were going to come back. But I love how you mentioned it as far as um, that the testers are going to be the most alert people on the road. They can't just look down at their screen or their phone. They have to be looking ahead. Otherwise, their seatbelt has to be buckled in. And then obviously when you enroll into it, you have to, click through all these prompts that literally give you all these warnings.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So one other thing I wanted to mention, and as you said, like, some of the things that I think some of the, if you want to call it competition, some of the other things that I think that they're currently dealing with, and they may actually end up getting kicked out of San Francisco. Specifically, like I think let's just jump in the cruise. So I think here's like an image of a cruise literally just being stalled in the middle of the road. And I think there's again, a couple of articles, and I've seen some Waymos like this. But either way, there's just it looks like people are asking essentially Waymo and Cruise to essentially halt production. But how from your perspective, like when you see this happening versus like the way that let's say Tesla's approaching the market, what do you think is either the advantage or disadvantage, or even what are your thoughts on obviously the competition dealing with basic things like this?
Well, I think that the Cruise is a really exciting company. I love that I've gotten to try a driverless car in San Francisco.
You've done like
Every
4 or
time,
5 live streams with those.
yeah, yeah, and every time I've tried it, it's worked. But you know, every time I've tried it, it's just been to try Cruise. Not one time have I actually been able to use it when I actually needed to use it. And I live in San Francisco, but my apartment is just outside the geofence. So if I want to use it, I have to go walk a few blocks, right? And so, uh, then I have to walk a few blocks to use it, and then it drops me off. Sometimes it drops you off into some place. Sometimes it, comes and passes you and then goes somewhere else, and you got to chase it. Um, and my parents just came into town, and they said, "Oh my!" First, he said, "Oh, I love using the FSD beta. I've been using the FSD beta. It just does all my driving. It's incredible." And then he said, we got to try the driverless cruise cars. And they really loved the ride, but it was just such a negative experience getting into the car because their hotel again was just outside the geofence. So we had to walk up this massive San Francisco hill. My poor mother was like panting. She was like, "Oh my God." It was like freezing cold and
Of
we're
course.
trying to walk and the cruise won't even come to the corner of the geofence that's closest to us. It's like a little further away. So we got to like
Oh,
walk
man.
an extra 10 minutes. It was a disaster. So, the issue is it's really sort of limited to the point of being useless right now. That's sort of the main issue. And the economics are very challenging. They're burning like $1 billion a year doing this, right? So and Tesla's, making $1 billion a year. They're burning $1 billion a year. That's pretty typical for Waymo and everybody else. It's a massive cash burn. You're not going to make it back off these $5 rides when the car costs, six figures. So that's the primary issue. But then there have also been other issues with the software basically just not being ready, right, for driverless at the end of the day. And they've sort of been able to mask this by just limiting it, right? So they said, okay, well, we're not going to let it go anywhere outside this geofence, and we're actually really going to limit the streets that it can travel on. So there's really like a few streets where you see all these cruises just driving up and down, right? When you use them.
Is it like a
Because it's like,
trucking line?
yeah, basically, it's like, okay, this is like the approved street that we know works, and we're just gonna have all the cars drive down this street, right? And it's kind of like, hey, that's kind of clever. So actually, you can launch a driverless service, just sort of limiting it. And they also limited the speed. They said we're not going to go into downtown, and they sort of made sure that everything that the hours were only at the dead of night when San Francisco just completely dies at night. You know, everyone's like goes to sleep early or something. I don't know, but after 10 p.m. there's like no traffic, right? So you can launch a driverless service if you do that, but there's still some of the edge cases that they haven't handled. Like for example, just last week, the firefighters had to break the window of a cruise because they had had it drive over a hose of a fire hose when they were
Oh,
putting out a fire in the past. And this is like something that can really hurt the firefighter because if
yeah.
you have the water stopping and going, it can like swing and hit them or like,
Yeah.
damage something or just stop them from putting out the fire. So this is a big issue and it had already happened before. So they saw the cruise car coming again and they said, oh God, it's going to happen again. They couldn't get the car to stop. So they just ended up having to break the window of the vehicle. And there were some other incidents where the cars just got stuck in the middle of the road and buses are blocked. Apparently, one bus full of people had to wait for 45 minutes. But you know what? All things considered, they've done pretty good. Of course, there's going to be these edge cases, right? And I'm kind of glad they're trying it before, maybe Tesla has to try it. But that's the beautiful thing about Tesla's approach. Like, you keep the human behind the wheel while the software is still in development, right? And you can have them ask the software to do the things it does well. So I'm on a, easy road, just in traffic, whatever. I turn on FSD. I go, okay, it knows how to handle this well. It needs to make a right turn up ahead. It knows how to do that. Simple stuff, it can do that perfectly.
Yep.
Even some complex stuff, it can do it perfectly. But then I see something more challenging. There's a, truck flipped over and it's on fire. I go, okay, now's the time for me to take over. I don't
Yeah.
have to wait and wonder, gee, I hope my car doesn't drive into that, lake of fire. I can actually take the controls and say, you know what, I'm going to actually handle this and help it do that. And I think this is actually where the sweet spot's going to be in the near future
Yep.
is that people are going to want both because the software can be at 99% and still be really, really useful. But there's still going to be that 1% of time when, let's say, for example, you're in a self-driving car and you just get stuck and you're just stuck in traffic for like 40 minutes. And you know that if you had manual control, you could just go around, you could do something, you could flip a U, do something to get out of the situation. But in a self-driving car, you're just stuck. And that
Yep.
1% of things that people want to do themselves while the software is still being perfected is going to want them make them want manual controls. And driving's still fun. So I think this is actually the sweet spot of a product. It's in your garage, no walking to get into the geofence. You can actually drive it anywhere you want to go, and you don't have to walk. It's right there in your garage, and human controls while the software is still being perfected. Basically, there's really no rush to get rid of the controls. It already sort of works pretty well with you supervising. And when when they introduced the Generation 3 platform in vehicles without controls, I think at that point, when it gets into production, it'll be just sort of like, okay, uh, we don't need controls at this point because we never have to disengage anymore. All of these situations have been thought through, they've been discussed because people see their cars, they know what they have to disengage for, they talk about it, and everything just sort of gets handled, right? You've seen everything. And at that point, you can say, okay, it's ready to go. So overall, I think Cruise is doing an amazing thing. You can't understate the difficulty of getting a service like that to work in San Francisco. But what they haven't proven is that they can be useful, that they can make money,
Yep.
or that they've really gotten the software good enough that it can be driverless 24 hours in all of San Francisco.
Yeah, no, I think you hit on all like I feel like we should hit every single point. We could even deep dive into every single, but just the fact that yeah, the technology, obviously it's, just your own experience with you and your mom, like have and your dad, and just literally having to go, not even being at the edge of the geofence, but going 2, 3 blocks into the actual location that it was possible. And you're just dropping some really good knowledge as far as like what Cruise is actually doing in San Francisco. It's not like they're going all over the place, but it's very specific areas that they're just kind of going up and down. But you also mentioned just
But I
some.
have to say this, when they got in the car, and it was both of their first time being in a car without a driver. I had already been in Waymo before and Cruise before several times. But you just see that smile on somebody's face when they realize this is history, that this
Yep.
is the first time I'm getting in a driverless car. So there really is some magic in that, and I applaud them for that. And I can't wait for Tesla to be able to do that too. I think ARK said, maybe by 2024 they could launch a similar service. So Tesla is actually able to get pretty similar results to what they've done. I've done some comparison videos, get there faster than Cruise even using just computer vision, which is amazing since
Yeah.
Cruise is using LiDAR and HD maps.
Yeah. No. Yeah. But I think you definitely mentioned some of, well, yeah, I think either way history is being made. I do
Mhm.
love, and as you mentioned, being in the heart of the Silicon Valley, being in San Francisco, we get to see and benefit from a lot of the technology that's just happening so fast. But yeah, I think you mentioned, as far as like kind of like, I guess you could say, the Tesla advantage is that, again, you have something that's parked literally in your driveway. You can literally turn it on. It can literally take you anywhere, and it's not geofenced in a specific location. We know obviously Tesla can do it profitably because that's what they're doing. And it's actually going to be potentially the biggest kind of like thing that's not necessarily factored in for increase in margin, right? Once they really
Yeah,
start doubling down on this. Um,
yeah.
but yeah, I think, I don't know. I really appreciate that knowledge. I wanted to kind of, unless you had more thoughts on that, I wanted to kind of get into some of the
Mm.
hardware for things that people are saying, and
Mhm.
especially with Elon, I think, because obviously we know Elon's talked about hardware for, it's going to come out at some point in the next year or so. But what is your thoughts on them allowing or not allowing to upgrade from hardware 3? Like, what do you think? What are your thoughts on the differentiation between those? And do you think it should be that they should be able to allow that computer to be upgradable from hardware 3 to 4?
Yeah, so I agree with the decision they made. I would love to be able to upgrade my hardware 3 car to hardware 4. But when you look at the totality of the situation, it actually makes a lot of sense. So, what you need to consider is, first of all, hardware 4 is not going to solve all your problems. Many of the softer issues, for example, picking the right lane, That's not going to be solved with a higher resolution camera, right? So generally, I think people tend to really overestimate what can be done by hardware and what can be done by software. My belief, based on what I've seen in my car over the last 2 years, is that hardware 3 should be able to achieve driverless. It should be able to do that at a safety level greater than a human because it's always paying attention, it's looking in every direction, and because it has those capabilities that are greater than a human in attention span and eyesight, it it should be able to drive better, assuming they can get the reliability of the different computer vision tasks working. And I believe that they can get it working because if you've seen what they've done with the pure vision, that was supposed to be the hardest task for computer vision. They said cameras can't tell the distance to an object
Yep.
in front of you or on sides of you. But they've turned off the radar and they've gotten it to be able to drive hundreds of miles for me for hours without any issue. Even if it's like raining, like there can really be fog or some challenging conditions, and it does pretty well. So if they can get that task to work, I think they can get all the tasks to work and they'll be able to achieve driverless on hardware 3. So that's why they're not doing upgrades because you don't actually need the upgrade. Your car with hardware 3 is going to continue to get software updates that make the cars better. And as a matter of fact, the hardware 4 cars are actually going to provide training data that's going to make your hardware 3 car drive better without it even having that hardware, right? So that's really important to understand. Your hardware 3 car is going to continue to improve. Now, the other thing to understand is Tesla's production run rate is a little under 2 million cars right now. There's 3.6 million Teslas out there with hardware 3, soon to be maybe 400,000. It's going to take 2 years of production before there's more hardware 4 cars than hardware 3. So after hardware 4 is released, most of the cars will be on hardware 3. So only a very small number. So hardware 3 is going to continue to be very well supported
Yeah.
because most people are on hardware 3. And if you look at Tesla's history, hardware 2.5 cars, they're still running great. Even people with MCU 1 just got FSD beta. Okay. So they take backwards
True.
compatibility seriously. We know with these cars, they're going to be running a long time. And it just is not worth it to upgrade people because what do you get? You get it working maybe a little bit better, right? People are thinking, oh, I'm going to get this hardware 4 upgrade. All my problems are going to be solved. It's going to be a robotaxi. No, that's not going to happen. It's going to be the same piece of shit software running on the next generation of hardware. Okay. So to clog up the service centers, upgrading 3.6 million cars, and somebody's like, hey, my windshield's broken. And they're like, sorry, we got to upgrade, John to hardware 4. And, they're pulling out all these wires. They're trying to figure out how to do it. They're changing the wiring harness. It's like, then they break someone's car. It's a big mess, right? So the cost of all that for my thing works maybe a little bit better. Maybe, maybe it even works worse at first as they, sort out some of the bugs. So it really doesn't make sense. And you're not going to keep your car forever. At some point, you're going to get a new car. You're going to upgrade, and you won't really have to worry about it, right? Long before they probably stop supporting it. And then people say, well, what if it does turn out that you need hardware 4 for driverless? And they just either can't do it with hardware 3 or they stop being willing to support it. And to those people, I would say, at that point, you can just upgrade the cars. You can figure out a retrofit because right now it's not worth it for a small upgrade in performance to do that big retrofit. But if it really was the difference between being a robotaxi and not being a robotaxi, the value would be so much, maybe, let's say $30,000 gross profit a year or something, that you could offer an upgrade for $10,000 or something, and people would probably still do it and it could be profitable, and you could maybe build out the service capacity for that if it really came to that. But that's not a foregone conclusion that they've failed. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with hardware 3 that they're doing hardware 4. They've actually delayed hardware 4 because they weren't really ready to use the extra power yet. So every couple of years, there's going to be a new generation of hardware, hardware 4, hardware 5, hardware 6, just like Apple does a new processor every year. But when they do their new A50 processor, they don't go say, okay, everyone with an A49 iPhone, come bring it back and we'll change your processor. They just
Yep.
make iOS run on both, right? And so it's going to be sort of the same thing there.
Yeah, no, and I don't think, like you said, MCC1, all of those cars are now being upgraded, retrofitted. But also, too, I think, as you step into hardware 4, you're also, I would assume a lot of there's additional upgrades outside of the computer, like the cameras that are going to be able to um, be used
Mhm.
through hardware 4. That again, if you had to do that, you would just be doing more than just the hardware. It would probably be the camera system, potentially some other sensors, things like that. I mean, there's just a
Right.
lot more than that. And I agree with you. The last thing that Tesla needs, especially as we're potentially going to put out 1.8 to 2 million cars that potentially are all upgradable, that will all be upgradable to autonomy, is going to be backlogging it with just upgrading it, because that's the last thing we want to do is
Mhm.
continue to backlog it more than they already are. Because as we
Yeah.
know, sales is growing way faster than the service center. So
And
um,
the other issue is you are never going to upgrade everyone. It's never going to happen, right? So because you're never going to convince even if it's free, you're never going to get everyone to upgrade. There's still cars out there that just don't care, or they're out in the middle of nowhere or whatever. So because not everyone's going to upgrade, you have to support hardware 3 anyway, right? Even if 99% of people upgraded, you'd still have to support hardware 3 as best you could because there's some out there. So it makes sense to just, if we're going to do it anyway, just leave people on hardware 3 and actually just make it really good. And, hardware 4, hardware 5, that comes down the line. You support the new features on there, but it's very much designed for backwards compatibility.
yeah, especially even like myself personally, like, I'm on the legacy X. I'm waiting for the Cybertruck. Wife's going to take the X. I'm going to get the Cybertruck. But, I'm still able to do, I'm getting all the same software updates that you're getting, even though I have, again, the different screen versus the landscape view. So the vertical screen versus the other. And I think, as you said, there's no
Yeah.
way that iPhones aren't built that way. It's not like we go to Apple every single year when we upgrade our phone, like, hey, I want the latest one. Can you, even though they probably could, and I bet you the system could still run on the new processor, but that's not how. Obviously, that you're not going to be building a good business model going that route.
Yeah.
Um, I think what are you most bullish about this year? Like what are, if you were to lay out expectations, let's say for the community, what are things that you would say, hey, this is in the bag, this is going to happen? And then maybe what are some things that you would just say, hey, like I've heard some of these comments that just needs to, that's still maybe 2-3 years out.
Well, um,
Not that you have
I think
a fortune telling.
yeah, I mean, I think I'm really excited about the single stack FSD beta. I'm really excited for Smart Summon. And I think, you know, FSD beta is the story. This is the story about autonomous electric vehicles, or you could call them smart cars, right? Like sort of like we had smartphones. This is like the dawn of the smart car era where your car is running software, it's electric. It's a dramatically different product from the product that we're used to in this category, which is an internal combustion engine dumb car made by people who don't know the first thing about software. So the shift to software driven smart cars, autonomous electric vehicles is a huge shift. And a lot of people sort of shrug or roll their eyes at FSD beta because it's taken so long to develop that nobody wants to look stupid and say, oh, I think this is going to be a huge thing or whatever. But it's now been released. It's going to start to become material financially for the first time this year. And I think that by the end of the year, there's going to be a million people convinced that Tesla is going to achieve driverless and that driverless is going to be widespread. Now, again, sort of going back to Amara's law, I think people, you know, obviously do tend to get overexcited. These things are hard, they take time. Um, I see this sort of rolling out very slowly. Like, I think it'll be one step at a time. First, we'll sort of see, maybe a trial of driverless operation at night, sort of like what Cruise is doing. You limit it to certain hours, certain approved places, certain times. You limit the speed, and then you can actually get down to driverless operation. You can think of the car as basically having two modes, a supervised mode and a driverless mode. So in the driverless mode, it operates at at a higher level of caution. It travels at a lower speed. It's more cautious. Maybe it has a shorter distance it can travel. And then when you get in the first robo taxis, you'll actually be able to just sort of sit behind the wheel, and still be able to take over if you need to. So this is, I think, what the product evolution looks like. It's not just 0 to driverless overnight, but it's driver
Yep.
assistance. It's then smart summon starting to work better in parking lots. Then maybe, okay, maybe your car can come drive up to a mile at low speeds at night to come get you. Then maybe the hours expand. Now you can do it during the day, and so on and so forth until we truly get to, a place where it's usually flawless all the time, except maybe really tough weather situations. Then they start looking at those tough weather situations. They start expanding the weather envelope it's able to function in. And just over the course of years, really becoming all times, all places, fully eyes off, hands off, minds off. Um, but it'll happen sort of step by step as the software achieves new levels of reliability. It's already gotten to the place where if you're supervising it, it's much, much safer than driving yourself. And yeah, I think the usefulness is just going to increase exponentially throughout this year as the software gets better. It's just getting so much smoother and more comfortable now, and less of a pain to use.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that, especially from what I've seen. But yeah, I think you make some really valid points about it's not like you just go from, it's not like December 31st, we're, going to get V12 or whatever it's going to be at that point, and then you just turn on driverless cars. It's going to be a slow progression. And what you may even see, kind of maybe what you were alluding to, is where when the software gets good enough where they start doing it in specific areas or at specific times, and then they grow from there. But that's going to be the insane thing, is that not only will they have potentially a customer fleet to tap into, obviously, for a while they weren't taking leasebacks, but they could even utilize some cars that they already own to be able to go do that. And again, these are cars that are either being turned in that they can turn on, that are being traded in as other customers are upgrading. But yeah, I don't know. It's not something you flip on. It's something that's going to take some time, especially with FSD beta. Like, what I've seen in the past 2 years and 4 months, it's been a slow progression. But when I look back at my videos from 2 years ago, you see huge improvements. But when
Yeah.
you're in it between the biweekly updates like 10.69.25.1 versus point 0.2, it's harder to see that sometimes. But when you look back at, the earlier versions like V7, V8, all those versions, like there's huge improvements. And so, ultimately, like I'm really excited for what they're going to do. I think, as you would probably agree, that they are the leader in general autonomy. It's not something that's geofenced. You can literally turn it on. I mean, you went from LA to Miami. I've had other friends do that as well, and they can pretty much have FSD beta go on any road. I mean, sure, there's certain areas where it's less trained in that it needs to get better in, but what other company is using their customer base? Again, they put out 3.6 million cars, 400,000 of them are using FSD beta. No one is going to have that access because of the vertical integration. They already are putting out the cars. They have the hardware and the software that they can put out and just turn it on with a software update when you subscribe or when you buy it, obviously on point of sale. So yeah, I'm personally really excited about that. I think you just dropped a ton of knowledge. I think obviously as we're kind of getting close to that hour-ish time, Investor Day is coming up. What are your expectations? Do you think there's going to be much talk of the, autonomy? Obviously, I think they've alluded to the next gen platform, 3 or whatever it is. And so, what are your expectations? And do you have any, I don't know, maybe crazy predictions or thoughts?
Well, we know they're setting up the Cybertruck production line in Giga Texas. We saw Elon tweet last night that he just tried the beta production Cybertruck and he said it was incredible. So
Yep.
maybe they could show that to us at the Investor Day or show us the production line, some of that stuff. They did say they'd show us their most advanced production line. So I assume that means Model Y 4680, but maybe it also means the Cybertruck line. That would be really cool to be able to see if they gave us a tour of that. And I know that would definitely excite people more. Details about pricing, configuration would be very welcome. Elon did mention a summer start of production. So it's February now, Q1, you know, by Q3, if they're going to start production, we'd probably want to probably get details about the configuration, final specs, that kind of thing. And then, of course, there's the Gen 3 platform and what they're doing with that. So I think that's going to be really, really interesting to hear about what they're thinking about doing there. Bigger than, all the sexy vehicles combined in terms of production. So many people would love a smaller Tesla vehicle that could really hit a more mass market price point. So this is going to be maybe Tesla's most important product ever. Actually, they're building multiple vehicles on this platform, including a robo-taxi. So that's going to be really exciting to see. Hopefully we get FSD Beta 11 before then.
Hopefully.
Yeah, but who knows,
Yeah.
Uh,
We're like
and
4 weeks away.
yeah, and Hardware 4, I hope we also get news on that before then. I mean, those are the two things I'm dying to know about Hardware 4 and FSD Beta 11, because they've been very secretive on FSD Beta 11 and what's in there. We've heard about some changes to the visualization and stuff like that. Obviously, the new highway functionality. And they've sort of started to mention Hardware 3, but we really don't know many details yet. So hopefully we get news on that way before Investor Day. But if not, at least I'll have to, corner somebody and try and get some information on this because I think a lot of people really want to know. So yeah, there's a lot of really exciting stuff happening at Tesla. So I don't think they'd call us there unless they had something really interesting to show us. So let's see.
Yeah, definitely. A couple of fanboy questions. Now that yoke is optional, will your Cybertruck have yoke or the traditional one?
Um, hmm. I think I'll probably go with the yoke just because it feels cooler to drive, and I don't usually use the steering wheel much. So better to just have less of it, right? I'll take half the steering wheel. That's all I need.
Yeah, fair enough. I've really enjoyed the yoke. And again, I bought an aftermarket yoke just to put it in, just to get the experience. I've driven in a plaid, and I personally really really enjoyed it because it's just something after like 20 minutes you'll get used to.
Yeah, and I
Um,
think the hardest thing to get used to actually isn't not having the top of the wheel, it's actually the blinkers. But both
yep,
the round wheel and the blinkers have those touch buttons, but once you get used to them, it's actually great because you don't have to ever lift your hand up to do stocks. You can just signal right from your wheel or turn on autopilot with just one tap without even lifting up your hands. It's great.
yeah, totally. Um, Omar, will you do a video in the Cybertruck, and can you get Elon to ride next in your next FSD beta video?
Yeah, I think that would be good. The other weekend, I ran into Andre Karpathy at this hackathon. I got his autograph, but I was like, "Oh, I should have asked him to go for an FSD beta ride with me." Him or Elon, or that would make for an entertaining video for sure to get their thoughts.
Yeah, no, totally. Well, Omar, thank you for your time today. I personally just want to, thank you for just being a friend over the years. Thank you for just being such a rock in the community, because I think a lot of times, especially through a lot of the headwinds and macro headwinds, especially over the past three months, and I would say yourselves and myself, and then several others included. Like when the stock was bottoming out, I think you just saw a lot of people, throwing for the Hail Mary, just complaining that Elon was distracted. When I think it's very few people get the opportunity to meet him, but also to have the same type of interactions like yourself and myself somewhat included in that. But it's just I think it's important to have people like yourself that are really well versed on the industry, how it's changing, and kind of things that they're up against and stuff. So again, just really appreciate your time. I know you're a busy man, so
Yeah, I mean, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's always fun to talk about Tesla, and I mean, for me, just going back to when we met in 2018, and uh, there's just so much misinformation, so much negative stuff put out that just has no basis. The media is so biased; they don't see any of the bullshit of legacy auto, and they give Tesla such a hard time over things that really don't matter. Uh, that it was just sort of like, wow, people are really underestimating this company. So I mean, I think what you do and what I do has just been about, hey, we love these cars and these products and they make our life better. And if more people knew about the benefits and could get into these products themselves, their lives would also be better, I think. And that's really what has made me continue doing this over the years is just all the people who are like, hey, we heard you guys talking about Tesla. We tried it out, and oh my God, yeah, it is so great to be able to charge right in my garage and not have to ever go get gas. It is so great to have this electric performance with, just instantaneous torque and, such a fun driving experience. And oh my God, Autopilot and FSD Beta have just completely changed my life. And, superchargers are so easy. Um, so, I mean, I think there's a revolution happening, right? In clean energy and electric cars and AI, and it's all happening at the same time. So it's just so much fun to watch, and I think we're really at the beginning of a really amazing story here with Tesla, and that's why I love following it.
yep. Yeah, and I think you also mentioned a good point. Like I think back in 2018, 2019, and really maybe even early 2020, we weren't the community. We needed each other to exist. I mean, otherwise, and we all kind of knew each other. We would meet each other at various events and things like that. But we literally didn't have anybody else. It was very there was very few prominent accounts that were just being pretty loud about what's true and what's not. I mean, you've
Yeah,
run three or
Tesla
four.
was pretty unknown.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and now it's just, obviously as the community's grown, it's easier to kind of like probably pick fights with each other. When,
Yeah,
ultimately it's, we're literally at the beginning stages of this company's history. And, there's a lot more to be done. And so again, it's, we're lucky to have you in the community again, fighting certain fake information and obviously all the testing that you're doing, feeding the system. You're probably the most driven FSD beta tester. I wish they need us. We need to ask Elon to put out a ranking on that or something like worldwide. But yeah, no. Again, I appreciate your time today.
yeah. All right. Well, take care, man. I'll see you around.
All right, see ya. Bye.